G'day, blokes and Sheilas from the toy world. It is Matty Boom Batty from Smash Tokyo Toys, and as you can see, I am wrapping up a Shogun Warriors Rodan, which is in absolutely perfect condition. The box is a bit ratty, which happens. This fell into my lap when I was given a huge collection of Shogun Warriors and Godaiken robots. I was recently talking to Brian Flynn of Super 7, who was able to give me a pretty good price on this. We were talking about sort of eBay, how eBay fluctuates and everything. And I pointed out that the one he was looking at was actually broken, didn't have any instructions. Mine, however, has instructions, isn't broken, has no flaws. I know most of the world looks at eBay and says that it's sort of the be-all and end-all of costs. But for me, I find that it fluctuates. It fluctuates all the time, and I don't really like it because I've been trying to price a bunch of Godaikens, and I find that the price goes up and down all the time. In Australia, toys are kind of at a crisis right now. It's impossible to get things. People have said to me, Matt, you're crazy getting rid of this Rodan. You'll never, ever, ever find another one in Australia. And they're probably right. But what I'm trading for is something we also will never get in Australia because I've already asked. I've asked all the distributors and they've all said they're not getting them. I'm kind of a big fan of Super 7. I always have been since they first started with their American Kaiju line. And when Brian Flynn announced that they were starting to do licensed products, and all the big fans of Super 7 were like, "Oh no, you're selling out." Well, they're a business, so I was like really excited. And when Brian Flynn announced that he was doing jumbos and shoguns, and they've done a whole new range, like they've done the Boba Fett, which I missed out on. I was quite sad. I really wanted to get on those. So, hearing that maybe I've got a chance to get some sent to Australia is pretty cool, because it means that, me and my friends here who really don't want to, pay $200 shipping on these giant jumbos, that's kind of a bargain, So I'm happy to send this off. And get some of those here in Australia and get them out to my friends, and we can get on board the jumbo Shogun Super 7 Express. So I'm getting this ready. Now today I said to you guys that I would talk to you about making toys in Japan, and like my last video on making toys in China, everything I say is common sense. I saw a video last night and there was some guy and he's like, "These are the two factories I use. These are the only two factories you'll ever need." And I looked up those factories and I was like, what's so special about these factories? And I don't know who that guy was. For all I know, he could be a really famous toy maker. He had like 3 million views. I don't get it sometimes. So again, if you're going to make toys in Japan, you're going to need an idea. And you're like, "Well, no shit, Sherlock." Well, you would be surprised, like I said in my last video, the number of people who think that they can just get away with stealing someone else's idea. So you've got an idea, and then you're going to need a wax sculpt. And when you make a wax sculpt for whoever it is you're dealing with in Japan, your wax sculpt actually has to be 0.1% bigger than your actual toy. And the reason is, when they make an iron mold, it actually shrinks. So your wax sculpt actually has to be larger than the toy that you make. Because once it goes in and they've made their iron mold, there's nothing left, because your wax mold will actually disintegrate or melt. There's nothing left, but it still needs to be a small percentage bigger than your finished toy, because it shrinks when they're making their iron mold. Now, no one else is going to tell you that, and I didn't know that, but luckily when I went to Sikaluna Kubo, I actually had them. I had Miyazawa-san do my sculpts for me. Well, he's one of the premier sculptors in Tokyo, so of course I did. But he actually sent me. He did 2 sets of molds, so I had my own wax molds, and I was like, these are really big. And they said, well, it's because your wax molds have to be bigger. So make sure you keep that in mind. If you're doing a 12-inch toy, it needs to probably be 12.5. All right, because it's going to shrink. So now I always will tell people all the time, if you're doing toys in Tokyo, a lot of things can go wrong because the Eastern way of making toys is not the same as the way that we think. Our Western way of doing business is completely different to the way they do things in Japan. So you need to keep in mind that they don't give a shit about your feelings at all. They don't care that you were first in line, that you paid first, that your run was a lot bigger than the guy before you. None of that. They don't care. What they care about is how your toy is made. So I was furious that I'd been waiting 2 years for my toys to be made, and no one was communicating with me. And it's not till now, 10 years later, that I realized that my toys were absolutely infuriatingly hard to make. See, so I wasn't thinking in terms of the toys had really bad undercuts. I didn't understand that they had told me numerous times that they were too small to pull through the molds. I didn't think of any of that. I kept raging and saying, well, I don't understand. I paid you guys years ago. I paid you years ahead of Mutant Vinyl Hardcore, and his toys were made in 3 months. I had that problem, see? I was being that guy. I was like, I don't understand, why are my toys taking so long? Well, of course they were taking so long. They were 7 parts and they were 1 inch tall each. And it was just impossibly hard to make that toy. So of course it took a long time. So you need to consider exactly what sort of toy you are making. So again, let's look at, after you've got your design ready, after you have some wax molds, here are the things you need to consider. Your parts. How many parts is your toy going to be? So again, if we've got our wax molds ready and we're doing a 2-part 3-inch toy, that toy is going to be much easier to make than a 12-inch toy with 16 parts. Now we talked about this in my China video. That toy, 2-inch part, 2 parts, and it's a hollow toy made in Japan, is going to be much easier to make. Sorry, I'm a bit frantic. I'll sit down now. Than a toy that's got 16 parts and it's 12 inches tall. That's fairly obvious. So how many parts is your toy and how big is it? And remember, my roller derby toy took 2 years as well, and it turned out that the reason it took so long was because her skates, her little tiny skates, which were 1/2 inch, could not pull through the mold. So they couldn't do it. They couldn't actually make the toy, but they didn't tell me. Nobody told me that the toy was impossible to make, the mold broke, they had to redo the mold. So there was no communication at all, because how do you tell someone who's paid you $20,000 that the toy is impossible to make? So you need to understand that there are many, many complications that can occur from making a toy. So think about your parts. Now again, in Japan, if you're doing a soft vinyl toy, there's many different types of soft vinyl toy you can do. You can do a puppet toy, which is just a 1-piece hollow toy, like a puppet, and put your hand in the middle. And puppet toys can be all different sizes. We've actually seen soft vinyl toys with puppet toys on their hands, which is genius. You can do large toys, small toys. I've seen different people. I've seen a guy who did a soft vinyl toy that was a head, just a big giant head. That was genius. Again, it had a very small opening at the bottom to allow the vinyl to enter and exit the mold. But again, you need to be able to find a factory that will do it for you. So Westerners coming into Japan, There are many problems they can have. They need to be able to find a factory that'll do it for them, or find a middleman who'll do it. Now, these days, which is different from when I did it, there's actually Americans in Japan who have set up their own factories, which makes it a bit easier if you're looking for someone to do it. I'm not going to name them. You can find them for yourself. These guys have never responded to me, so not sure what that is. Could be because I'm Australian, could be because they don't like me personally, but I know they do work with people from overseas. So you need to find a factory that will work with you. Now, I'll give you an anecdote. I have a friend who's a designer in Japan, Rumble Monsters, and when I first met him, I was very excited to meet him. He's an amazing designer, and him and I have done toys at Winter Festival, and I was so excited to meet him. And communication is hard because he doesn't speak English and I don't speak Japanese. But I was looking at his robots and I said, this is amazing. Why don't you and I collab together? And I said, maybe, we can do something through your factory. And he flat out was like, no, no way. And of course, me being me, have a short fuse. Inside I was like, I don't understand. I don't understand why he wouldn't, work with me. Well, it had nothing to do with him not liking me. Him and I get on great. What it has to do is when we're talking to these people, they have their own special relationship with their factory, and they don't want anything to jeopardize their relationship with their factory. And you need to keep this in mind when you are dealing with the Japanese, because they don't want anyone from outside to come in and upset this special relationship they have with the factory. And it took me, it was like probably a month later when I finally went, oh my God, Matt, you're so stupid. Rumble Monsters wasn't trying to upset me. He just did not want to upset his relationship with his factory. And I got that everywhere I went. Anytime I met someone new in Tokyo, I was like, hey, why don't we do something? Why don't we do something together? They would say exactly the same thing. They'd be like, whoa, no way. And I was like, is this like a racist thing? And they were like, no. It's just me and them. I don't want anyone coming in between this. And I was like, oh, okay. Took me a while to get that. It's a thing. All right. So once you have your factory, there's like quite a number of rules you have to get into your head. So time, you have to be patient. All right. After my first toys that took 2 years, the second time round, I was a lot more patient. The only problem I had that second time round was the fact that no one was telling me what was going on. You can try whatever you like. You could try getting an interpreter. A lot of the times, if there's no communication, something has gone wrong. That's what I've found. Over the last 15 years of doing this, I've learnt that from everyone I've spoken to, it's not just you. It's not you. It's happened to everyone. Even the top guys I know, who everything has gone perfectly fine for maybe 20 years, something has eventually gone wrong one time, and they all act the same as I did. Everyone freaks out. You all worry what's happened to your money. Don't worry, and keep in mind, you can always just jump on a plane and go straight over there. I mean, I live in Australia. I could be there the next day. So now you have, you've set up your factory. Everything's going well. How do you place an order? All right, how are you going to place an order? So in Japan, the best thing about going to Japan as opposed to China is Japan does small runs of toys. So you can, you could set up your iron mold, and you can say, all right, I only want 100 toys. My toy is a 2-part toy. You could say, I want 100 blue for my first run. So you get 100 blue toys, and that's great. What you need to do is you'll wait, your 100 blue toys will turn up. Now, what about your packaging? Well, that's up to you. You make your own packaging. Most of us will do a header card with a bag, and the painting is entirely up to you as well. For me, I don't believe in painting toys because I like unpainted toys, but from there your expenses get bigger and bigger. If you want paint masks cost a lot of money. A paint mask is a small piece of metal that covers the toy. So if you wanted to paint a hat like mine, if you wanted to paint the hat red, you would need a paint mask for that. To do the black, you need another paint mask that then goes over and you paint the black. For the white, you need a third paint mask. So as you can imagine, if you're painting a toy 20 different colors, you're going to need 20 different paint masks. This is where your expenses pile up. Now, most of the designers I know who have Sofubi toys, they all learn how to use an airbrush. I never learnt, just because my hands shake too much from cancer. So these are all things you will need to learn. Once again, let me talk to you about the perils of becoming a toy designer. If you think that you're going to be toy famous, that may not ever happen. You need to spend at least a year marketing your toy, going to every toy forum you know, seeing if this is a thing that people want. Guess what? You think doing a double-headed Krampus is going to make you super famous? Someone's probably already done it. Going the route of the two-headed zombie, the two-headed ape toy, sure, seems to be the way to go these days, but just remember 5 or 6 other guys are doing it right now. There'll be 5 guys already trying to jump on the two-headed zombie wave, just because they know that tag will slurp it up. Alright, so that's the quick and easy way to make things in Japan. Remember, if you want to do it, please God, write to me first. I'll tell you everything you need to know. This is just like a 1-minute video that I put together, and I've had 3 coffees, so I'm doing it a bit quick. Obviously, most people in the past used to use a middleman. The middlemen have gone underground a bit these days. Some of them rip people off, some of them just got caught out doing the wrong thing, some of them just got lazy and don't want to do it anymore. There are plenty of guys, as I said, plenty of guys from America now in Tokyo who can help you out. If you're American and you want to make a toy, the costs are quite low. If you're Australian, if you are from any country whose dollar is lower than the American dollar, you will get burned. The costs are crazy high. Like I said, people say to me all the time, I was talking to Jeff Lamb, and Jeff Lamb sort of said, oh, you know, like my last toy, the machine cost was $1,000. And I was like, oh my God, I almost vomited. I was like, Jeff, $1,000? Mine was 15,000 US. And I was just shaking my head. I'm thinking, what? Jeff Lamb's toys are all like 10, 12 inches. What? My toys are this big, and they were 2 parts. So, you know, these days I sort of start to think, was I really, really ripped off back in those days? If all these American guys with these giant toys were all paying like $1,000 for tooling costs, why was I paying 15,000? What was going on back then? What didn't I know about? So be very careful. When I say you need to do your research, I didn't do any research. And finding out years later that everyone else had really low tooling costs and I had enormous ones because I went through a middleman and he was obviously shaving a lot of money off the top, that's really bad to find out years later. So do your research, talk to other designers. Now I always say that, you know, keep in mind that these guys are your competition, and most of the time they're just going to say, wow, that's great, go ahead and do that. But they're not going to tell you all the things that can go wrong. I will tell you everything that can go wrong when you're trying to make a toy. A lot of things can go wrong. So the reason I went the Japan route is because all of the people who run the factories, you know, not the new young American crowd that's coming in, Americanizing everything, all the people who run these factories are old men and women, and when they die, that is the end of Japanese kaiju toys. That is a lost art form. It'll be gone forever. I went to Japan a long time ago and I met the lady, and she was the last lady to make Japanese silk, and I spoke to her at length, and I told her that these art forms that we have in the world, and everything's being digitized now, when she died, that was the end of Japanese silk. It's all done on machines now, and I own some of that Japanese silk, the last stuff she ever made, and it's terrible. when if you think about it, because Americans are coming in and they're like, that's fine, we'll just make Japanese kaiju. It will be American kaiju. You need to get that through your head. It won't be Japanese kaiju anymore. Once they're dead, their art form is gone. There are no new young Japanese people coming to take it over. All they care about is the digital world. So that's why I made Japanese toys, and there's a lot of people like me and we all think the same way, and that's why a lot of us are making Japanese toys in Japan. So hopefully, if you slow this down, you won't get me full coffee brain trying to wrap up this Rodan in 50 layers of bubble wrap to send to America. Maybe it's helped some people, and if it has, you could share it, because I notice I only get like 50 views out of my 6 videos. Everyone else, I hope you have a really good week. I've got no fingernails, I can't open this. So have a good week. Try not to be douchebags on the internet. See ya.